Do you believe that America is addicted to white supremacy?
I believe that I tweeted that, and as I've said earlier, I believe much of my thinking has evolved over the last half decade.
How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about the House oversight hearing featuring NPR CEO Katherine Maher. Now, I looked her up. I did not see a Bill Maher connection, so I don't think she's any relation to him. But she is, however, the CEO of NPR, and she's woke. She is very woke. She's done podcasts and interviews and TED Talks in which she has displayed her wokeness. Now, her being woke and the CEO of NPR wouldn't really be a problem if NPR, first of all, wasn't obviously biased toward the left. And second, they get federal funding. Now, if you ask NPR, they'll say, oh, it's less than 1% of our funding. Okay, if it's less than 1%, then why do you need it? Go ahead and just shed that federal funding and you'll be fine, right? You don't got to worry about House oversight hearings. You don't have to worry about questions of being biased to one way or the other. You can just be free. Why not do that? I don't understand. Now, before I go any further, let's look at an interview from 2021 with Trevor Noah on The Daily Show. This will give you an idea of what kind of individual we're dealing with. Then we're going to get to a couple more things from this House oversight hearing, and I will link to all videos in the box. If you're on IG, visit a link in the bio, go to the corresponding article on the website. But without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
Fact of the matter is that most written knowledge today has been written by white, colonial, European, North American men. And so one of the things that we're really focused on is how do we think about correcting the record? How do we think about writing people into history? How do we think about writing people into the present who haven't been represented in the same way?
I got a question. When you say we have to figure that out, who is we? What is the racial makeup of the we? That's what I want to know, because if you're complaining about white men writing everything and then your team is like 89% white men, who cares? It's the same thing. At that point, is it about who's writing it or how they write it, from which lens they write it, for which narrative they are trying to craft?
Knowledge, when we talk about knowledge for the whole world, it needs to be reflective of the whole world. And so one of the first things we do is we measure the gaps. Who is missing on Wikipedia? Women are missing. People of color are missing. People from the global south are missing. Indigenous communities are missing. The history of Black Americans is missing from Wikipedia. Then we think about who's doing this work today and how can we support them? And it's not just about, say, for throwing money at the problem. It's also about going directly to these communities and saying, what do we need to change about ourselves? You know, what about the experience of editing Wikipedia? What about the culture of Wikipedia? What about the policies of Wikipedia need to change? Because in reality, the beautiful thing about Wikipedia is it is changeable all the time. It's edited 350 times a minute. So if we want to change it, that's fully within our power. So yes, we are cursed with a record that is hugely biased throughout history. But the power to change that agency lies with every single one of us who contribute to it. Fact of the
All right, there we go. So that's, again, Katherine Maher from when she was over at Wikipedia. After Wikipedia, she went to NPR, which is where she is right now. I think she went to NPR last year, 2024. Okay, now here is a piece of the oversight hearing. It was kind of like long, 2.5, 3 hours. I'll link to whatever I can find in the box. Let's watch this. Then we got another one after this.
Do you believe that America is addicted to white supremacy?
I believe that I tweeted that, and as I've said earlier, I believe much of my thinking has evolved over the last half decade.
Do you believe that America believes in black plunder and white democracy?
I don't believe that, sir.
You tweeted that in reference to a book you were reading at the time, apparently, The Case for Reparations.
I don't think I've ever read that book, sir.
Let's pause. Now, she's good at what she's doing, but I can see right through it. He's asking her about a quote on Twitter, now X, and she says, well, I don't believe that. Did you write it, though? I didn't ask you if you believed it. Did you write it? Is that what you said back in 2020? Like, what, 4 or 5 years ago? Did you write it? And then she says, well, I don't know about that book. Maybe she did not read the book titled that, but maybe she read someone's case for reparations. You see what I'm saying? So she knows what he's meaning, but she's answering the questions in the way to hide the truth.
He tweeted about it. You said you took a day off to fully read the case for reparations. You put that on Twitter. And
that could have been the book, or it could have been somebody's tweet that had that as the title.
January of 2020.
Apologies, I don't recall that I did.
Do you believe that white people inherently feel superior to other races?
I do not.
You don't? You tweeted something to that effect. You said, I grew up feeling superior. Ha, how white of me. Why did you tweet that?
I think I was probably reflecting on what it was to grow up in an environment where I had lots of advantages.
Do you think
So you do believe that whites are superior, or maybe you thought that you were better because you're white? I mean, basically, again, you're kind of confirming what he's saying.
white people should pay reparations?
I have never said that, sir.
Yes, you did. You said it in January of 2020. You tweeted, yes, the North, yes, all of us, yes, America, yes, our original collective sin and unpaid debt, yes, reparations, yes, on this day.
I don't believe that was a reference to fiscal reparations, sir.
What kind of reparations was it a reference to?
I think it was just a reference to the idea that we all owe much to the people who came before us.
Another one of those answers, fishy, not really getting down to the bottom of the actual issue. And of course, she knows exactly what he's saying. She wrote the tweets. She knows that he knows what she meant by the tweets. But this right here is just what political type people do. Okay. I'll link to this video in the box, but we got to go through a little bit more. Let's go through a little bit more. This is going to be James Comer.
And I don't even recognize the station anymore. It's not news. I feel like it's propaganda. I feel like there's disinformation every time I listen to NPR. And, you know, a media entity like MSNBC or Huffington Post that, in my opinion, consistently spews disinformation, they can do that. They're a private company. But NPR gets federal funds. And you know, I have a problem with that, because if people in Alaska, if all they have is public radio, then all they know is what these headlines say. And they're wrong about COVID-19. And the headlines are in the background. I don't have time to go over all these headlines that are wrong. About Russian collusion, wrong. Wrong. About the Hunter Biden laptop, wrong. And then there's a story about me. And part of what we went through on this committee during the Biden investigation, which, by the way, ended with Joe Biden's last act as president of the United States, pardoned his entire family preemptively for an 11-year period, which just so happened to be the 11-year period that this committee investigated the Bidens, that we had subpoenaed bank records. I don't think NPR reported about the pardons, but they reported a lot about how there was no evidence of any wrongdoing and things that just weren't true. In fact, there's a story, NPR, lawmaker leading Hunter Biden House investigation, accused of owning a shell company. Well, that's me. Ms. Maher, are you familiar with that story that NPR wrote about me at the height of the Biden investigation when you all were disputing?
Hold on, before he continues, a lot of your mainstream media, NPR included, have been weaponized against the American people, in my humble opinion. Weaponized against the American people, weaponized against any kind of conservative, anybody on the right, anybody that's not going with a Democratic Party agenda. You are the enemy of the state, basically. So James Comer wrapped up in that. All of us wrapped up in it as conservative people, in my humble opinion. But let's continue.
Every aspect of our investigation that is 100% factual, we have hundreds of pages of evidence, hundreds of pages of bank records, hundreds of pages of emails. Do you remember the story that NPR wrote about me saying I had a shell company?
Congressman, I was not at NPR at the time, and I'm unfamiliar with the story.
Where do you get your sources on something like that? That's a very serious accusation, because we're investigating a president and his family who had 28 shell companies. I have an LLC, had 5 properties in it. It's in my financial disclosure form. I've gone into great detail, given lots of interviews. But people that listen to NPR, they're totally disinformed.
Let me pause again. Now, it doesn't matter that this story about the shell company and the Hunter Biden laptop was before she became the CEO. The reality is that NPR has been the same with her and before her. It's a bunch of left stuff. So why are we paying you federal monies if we know exactly what you're going to do? We know the kind of stories you're going to put out there. We know you're not really trying to turn over a new leaf. It's going to be the same old left-wing propaganda. Why would we give you any federal funding for that? If you want to be a left-wing rag, do that on your own dime.
On the truth. And I have a problem with that because you get federal funds. And I do believe there was a role for public radio 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. But because of technology today, I don't think there's a role for public radio anymore. And I think you've abused the privilege that you had with receiving federal funds. Because these headlines here are not true. This is disinformation on some huge topics. Do you want to dispute anything that I said in the remaining 30 seconds?
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, I want to recognize your concerns. One of the first things that I did in coming in May was...
Well, there's more, but the video is going to end right there. So I'll link to this in the box. I'll link to the full thing if I can find it in the box. But again, that is the NPR CEO, Katherine Maher. No relation to Bill Maher as far as I know. But as I close, I want to say this. I don't think NPR needs any federal funding. They say, according to NPR themselves, I'll put the article up. Maybe I'll put it in the box. We only get about 1% or less of our money from the federal government. Okay, then just don't take that money and you'll continue on just fine, right? If you can't survive on 99% of your money, then you weren't going to survive anyway. So survive on that. Or if you're going to take our money, taxpayer money, be more neutral. Don't just say everything's left, left, left. You're giving a false impression of what the truth is. Call it more in the center. If you're going to report on bad things about the right, do the same thing about the left and be more neutral the way that Associated Press and Reuters used to be. All those rags have become left-wing rags because they think they're in a fight against the right. They've been indoctrinated in K through 12 in college to engage in a civil war of sorts against us. And if they're going to do that, why would we pay them to do that? It doesn't make any sense. And I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what say you? What's your opinion about NPR receiving federal monies? Should that be going on? Should it not be going on? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments below. You guys know where I'm at. I support NPR's right to freedom of speech, but I don't think that we should be funding them if they're going to do stuff like this. Why would they get federal monies while hurting the people? Like, you're putting out misinformation. Call it right in the center with no affiliation to the left or the right, just right in the middle. No bias. Do that if you're going to get taxpayer money. We're paying you for a public service, not to push propaganda. But whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.